Hello, math students. Welcome back to Module 10, Percent and Proportional Relationships. This is Lesson 6, and it's called Fluency with Percents. Our goal for today is we will practice all the different strategies with percents. The question that I want you to be thinking about is, what is the most important thing to do when working with percents? All right, things to remember. So we're going to apply what we have learned about the formula quantity equals percent of whole, and we are also going to apply what we learned about using a modified double number line to determine the percents. And we're going to do that with a practice problem. Corey and Everett have collected model cars since the third grade. Corey has 80 model cars in his collection, which is 25% more than Everett has. How many model cars does Everett have? So it says right here that Corey has 80 model cars in his collection. So I'm going to make note of that. Corey has 80 model cars. All right, then it goes on to say, which is 25% more than Everett. How many model cars does Everett have? So if this is saying 25% more, that's telling me that Corey is not the whole. Corey is not the whole because it says 25% more. So I'm going to say that Corey is probably the quantity. And if Corey is the quantity, then I am going to say that Everett is the whole. So step number 1 is identify the parts. So we're going to say that Corey is the quantity, and it says that Corey has 80 model cars. So 80 is going to be the quantity that we have. Then it says that the whole is going to be Everett because 125 more than Everett, and so we're trying to figure out what Everett has. So we don't know what it is, but we do know that Everett is the whole, right? So we're going to put X there. And then what would the percent be? Could the percent be 25%? Think about it. It says 25% more than Everett. So could the percent be 25%? If you're thinking no, you're on the right track because we know that Everett is the whole and Everett automatically is 100%. So if Everett is automatically 100% and Corey has more than him, then we know that this could not be just 25%. What would it have to be? If you're thinking 125%, you're absolutely right because of this key word right here, 25% more than Everett. And we decided that Everett was the whole, and the whole always equals 100%, so 25% more than 100 is 125%. So now we have all of the parts labeled and identified. So step 2 says, make a modified double number line, determine the percents. So remember, the hardest, trickiest part that I think sometimes in using the modified double number line is how to put your percentages on. But we know, given, this one's always 0, okay? And then if we're looking at the percentage that we're trying to represent, I'm thinking that we're going to represent either by 5s, by 25s, probably that's it because you can't really do 10s here and you can't really do 20s here. But for the sake of not having to write a bazillion of them, I'm going to go with 25. So I'm going to say that this was 25. So then this one would be 50. This one would be 75. This one would be 100. And then this one would be 125. Okay? So that's going to work so far. All right. So if we have our percentages up at the top, what do we know about these two pieces of the tape? We know they're extras, so we're just going to squiggle them out. And is that okay to do? Absolutely. It's absolutely okay to squiggle them out because we're trying to figure out the whole. So we don't need any extras beyond that, okay? All right, so we now know that the quantity is 80. And remember, the quantity is Corey. And Corey has 25% more than Everett. So we're going to say that this whole thing right here has to be how much? And if you're thinking 80, I think you're on the right track. Let's try it and see what happens. So we're going to say this whole thing right here is 80. Okay, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections. So how do I fill those in? If you said 80 divided by 5, you are correct. So 5 goes into 8 one time. With 3 leftovers, bring down your 0, that's 30. 5 goes into 30 6 times. So now I know that in each section, I have to write 16. Okay? And now, the question that we actually are trying to figure out is, how many cars does Everett have? Okay, well, remember we said that Everett was the whole, which is right here. So now we know that this right here must be who? Everett. Okay, and if that's Everett, if I spell it correctly, sorry, then this is, which we already identified, that's Corey, right? So how many cars does Everett have? Well, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 16. So I'm going to take 16 times 4, which gives me 64. So I now know that Everett has 64 cars and Corey has 80 cars. Now, could we check it to see if we're right? Well, you're absolutely right, we can. So we would say that 80 equals what percent times 64, so that we can figure it out. And you're going to use a BU chart to figure that guy out. Our variable is x. We times by 64. So to undo that, you divide by 64, and you should be left with x. So I'm going to divide this side by 64. 64 divided by 64 is 1 times x gives me x. Okay, what you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So now I have to take this, 80 divided by 64. I see 8 as being a possible number that goes into both, which would give me 10/8, which that can simplify to 5/4. Ha-ha! Which I do that, and I get 1 1/4, which is really how much of a percent? 125%. So were we correct? We absolutely were. So you did it! Hooray! That was fantastic. So now that you know how to do both the modified double number line and then we use the equation to check our work to make sure we got it right, you now have one to practice by yourself. So here's the next one. You're going to practice it by yourself. I would like you to do the process that we did where you're identifying the parts, the quantity, percent, and whole. I would like you to make a double number line, modified double number line, and then I want you to determine the percents. Okay, so we know that Everett was 100%. We know that Corey was 125%. You're going to do the same thing for the next problem. 75% of the students in Jessie's class are 60 inches or taller. If there are 20 students in her class, how many students are 60 inches or taller? So you've got to figure that out using the process that we just did. Okay, and I'm going to have you try that by yourself. So go back to our goal. Today we will practice all the different strategies with percents, which is what we just did. What is the most important thing to do when working with percents? The biggest hint I can give you is this step right here. The most important thing to do when you're working with percents is to make sure that you identify all of the parts that you have so that you can set it up correctly. All right, my darlings, that's all I have for you today. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.